right, here we go again, everybody. We are ready and set for Eternally Bored. I am Charles Washington. We're with, in the background, producer Ian Phelan. And of course, we have, as always,
Trey Chambers.
And this is going to be our best and worst episode of the year. Our best guest of the year is back.
Wow, that's I feel so honored by that, just to win this award of best guest of the year. I
don't know if I agree with Charles.
I knew I always deserved it, and now it's just like coming into fruition. It feels great.
Abby couldn't make it either, but anyways.
I mean, you gotta take what you can get. So.
Oh Lord.
A little harsh.
So today we are going to be basically talking about 2017, basically our overall feelings on the year, and then we'll go through our top 3 and bottom 3 of 2017. So today is just going to be an episode where we just talk about games and last year. So let's start with the first topic. How do you think 2017 was in gaming overall? Special guest Ben.
Let's make him as a shock as the most critical gamer. I don't think it was that good of a year, honestly.
You know what my word is for it? Derivative. It was a very derivative year.
I think that's a good word for it. I think we're going to talk a bit about sort of the specific problems about it. I think overall, it's sort of, I guess it's always hard to evaluate a year when you're at it because you haven't really played all the best games from it and you can sort of not see what's going to last. But yeah, I'd say it's a pretty slow year. I was looking for stuff to put on my top 3 list and I had a lot of trouble because it's like, man, there's not that many good games that came out this year.
Conversely, I mean, I actually had some trouble finding games that I really hated this year as well because everything was just so, like, average.
Yeah, a lot of middling.
A lot of middle territory this year, so I guess that's good for overall quality from the bottom up, that nothing was truly atrocious. But yes, nothing was truly good either.
I don't know about nothing being atrocious.
Yeah. Exactly.
Find some examples of that.
I tend to agree with Charles. Like, the only thing I rated lower than 4 was not a game that was released this year. It was that Little Devils game. And we probably just played it with the wrong player count because we played it with 3 players.
Terrible.
So I kind of agree with Charles. I think it's been like an average year as far as like there's not been a lot of exceptional games, but there's also not been too many like complete train wrecks of games. There's been a few, but not as many as other years. So I guess it's been a quantity over quality kind of year, except in my case, I don't know about these gentlemen, but 2 of my favorite games of all time came out this year, which I'll talk about when we get to the top 3. So conversely, last year I don't think I rated more than 1 or 2 games a 9, and I didn't have any 10s and just a handful of 8s. But I rated 2 games a 10 this year that I'll be talking about. So some exceptional games, but not very many.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we always like to evaluate is like things that are going on. So what trends did you see in 2017?
Well, I think one of the biggest trends, which we're going to talk about many examples of this, is the preponderance of legacy games.
Yeah.
It's just the big thing that sort of exploded. I mean, I think Pandemic Legacy was like 2 years ago, the first season, and now there's season 2 and Gloomhaven and Seventh Continent and et cetera, and they just keep making more. Charterstone, yeah. So that's a big one. I think another one is, as you said, sort of a derivative year. Lots of spin-offs with current games. They're massively increasing the number of Codenames games to include every IP that ever existed.
It's the new love letter.
There's more Pandemic games. There's more. There's a spin-off of Terra Mystica, the Gaia project. So it's just like, create a game, make it slightly different. Hey, now you have a new game. That was 2017.
Like drafting has been a big mechanic this year. Because I think it was an underused mechanic in the past, and I feel like it's kind of become, I don't know, more popular this year. I don't know. But, Pandemic, legacy games for sure is the trend, and it's just kind of exploding. But even still, I mean, there's 10,000 new games that come out every year, and there's, even last year, there was only like 10 or so legacy games. So it's not like a huge trend, but it's definitely like, as far as the games getting the most buzz and news coverage, definitely it's the legacy releases, because it's a new exciting mechanic, right? I mean, we haven't really had a new mechanic since deck building, I guess, and that was like 30 years ago. So this is like the first time there's like a new mechanic on the scene since then. So
not exactly 30 years ago, but I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel sad.
I don't consider Dominion to be the founding deck building game.
What? I mean, of course, there's Magic, but
Yeah.
it's
it's a constructed deck. That's a different mechanism.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you're still building a deck. You're just one's doing it inside the game, one's doing it outside the game, but in both cases, you're building a deck. But anyway, that's a different episode.
Different topic.
Yeah, we'll put that in that. Come to act out later.
Probably the trend that I looked at the most was just, and I've noticed this in some of the more complicated games I've seen. It's like a rise of like one-player components of multiplayer games, and that's been going on for a number of years. But I felt like this year, I'm like, man, there are a lot more games that are major releases that are just designed, supposedly designed to be played with multiple people, but they have like the rules for just solo in them, and I guess just
it's becoming almost an industry standard that you have to release your game with solo play, and if you don't, you're alienating a sizable audience.
Right. So I mean, I guess it's something that it has continually grown for a long time, and then I noticed a lot of games that people consider very good are best with one player now.
This was the first year I ever played a game solo. We had a flood here in Houston. You might have heard about it, Hurricane Harvey. And so I was like stuck in my house for 2 weeks, and I was kind of getting a little stir crazy, and I really wanted to play Spirit Island, but no one could drive to me because the streets were flooded. So I was like, you know what? I'll play Spirit Island by myself, and I did, and I actually had a really great time. So.
And our first Spirit Island is down. If you're keeping count,
one Spirit Island.
Prepare for more.
Turn this into a drinking game. No, don't. You'll die. So yeah. How do y'all feel about the trends of this year? Do you like these trends of legacy games?
I mean, legacy games. I think they're sort of overhyped for what they are. I think the problem with a legacy game is it limits the amount a game can be played, and games, by their nature, should be something, in my opinion, that is endlessly replayable and sort of the same when you play it to some extent. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't have game variety, right? But, a game should be as good now as when I play it 20 years from now. It should be the same, just like any of the classic games, Go or Macau.
And you wouldn't want to have to buy it again 20 years from now if you have a board game.
Right.
The one thing about legacy games, and I see them, games are built upon other games, and one mechanic that they are bringing back is the choose your own adventure mechanic, which I find hilarious to see return, because I love choose your own adventure books as a kid, and I found a few of the legacy games, some of have this choose your own adventure element in them that goes pretty far. Ryan Lalcott, looking at you, you're very good at it, somewhat, and as far as the legacy games goes as a trend, I do think it's something that is sort of fun to see, but I am of the opinion that I do not want to see the market proliferated. I would much rather it just be the niche gaming market that it is. Unlike other genres of games, I don't think the market would be able to support more than maybe 5 or 6 major releases of this type a year, and even that seems excessive to me. I mean, at this moment, it seems like they release 2 major legacy games a year, and other companies are gearing up to add legacy components or expansions to their games. And honestly, outside of the major blockbusters, I don't think the genre or the hobby could really support it at that rate.
Yeah, I love legacy games, but I do agree with Charles that I don't want it to explode just because I don't have enough time to play them all, because they're such a commitment, and I definitely want to complete them, and freaking Gloomhaven is going to take up the next 6 months of my life, so as much as I'm enjoying legacy experiences, it causes problems as far as like scheduling gaming sessions, and you have to get the same group together. Although one of the things I love about Gloomhaven is you can drop players in and out. I hope that becomes a trend in legacy games. Is like I want the legacy game format to continue growing and expanding, but I definitely think they're better when you can just easily add and drop players. Because if you can't, like for Pandemic Legacy, I mean, you can't really do that. I don't think you can easily for Charterstone, which is the next one we're going to start. It's just, yeah. But as far as the format, I love the format, and some of my favorite games of all time are legacy games. So I am happy that it's going to be around, at least for a while. All right, what are you looking forward to in 2018, Charles?
Ironically, I'm looking forward to Founders of Gloomhaven as opposed to regular Gloomhaven. I found the myth and lore of the universe interesting, but I didn't want to go through all the time of
playing
just
100 sessions of the same game.
Yeah, and and I also found like the actual mechanics of Founders very interesting when I researched them on the Kickstarter. So it's something I kickstarted, and I'm like, okay, this looks like it's going to be pretty good. I think it'll be under the radar. Plus, it already has probably the biggest lead in for any sort of city management game that you can get, since it's coming off of this massive bean of Gloomhaven that it is.
Yeah. That's
my first. I have two. Haha. So go ahead.
I'm really looking forward to some reprints that are coming out next year. They're reprinting Brass, including a variant in that. And Brass is a super good game. So that's going to be interesting to try.
Yeah, I back that.
Yeah, so I'll definitely look forward to playing that. They're also reprinting Container, which is a game that's been very difficult to find and is extremely heavy. So I'm hoping to get an opportunity to play that too. It's heavy when I played it, but
it's mathy. I wouldn't say it's heavy.
Mathy, heavy,
I wonder if they'll add some flair to it. Like some artistic gumption to go behind the good gameplay. Because I remember Container being very.
I hated that game. It was boring. Yeah.
To look at.
Okay, it is a little dry, but it's also sort of unique in its system. So I think it's a pretty interesting game.
I do like it's like a player-driven economy, which is a fascinating concept. However, that can also mess things up. Like if someone is not playing "quote unquote" right, they could hose certain players and then not other players to the benefit of those players that are not harmed by the fact that they're making bad decisions. So it's fragile, I guess, is how I'd describe the game state.
Yeah,
because it's player-driven.
And because of that, it also has the kingmaker element, which is what I remember from Container. Like, oh, I'm going to tank now, and it's going to directly benefit this person because they no longer have competition.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm not saying it's the best game ever. I'm just saying I'm looking forward to playing the reprints.
Tell me how you feel. All right, what's the other games you're looking forward to? How shall we eviscerate further?
No, I mean, look, you did one. I did my one, so now I'm gonna let my second one happen later.
All right.
I'll hold my time.
I have two as well. Both of them are legacy games because I'm a huge fan of legacy mechanics.
Addicted. Excuse me.
Yeah, I am addicted. I fully admit it. However, both of these games you can add and drop players easily. As far as I know, there's no you have to play the same campaign with the same people. The first one is Detective. And now there's two Detective Legacy games coming out, and I'm actually excited about both of them. But the one I'm talking about, I don't remember the subtitle. They both have subtitles.
This is a trend. I don't remember the subtitle. Mark 1.
Yeah. So there's two of them. I kickstarted one of them. They're both legacy games, and they're both detective games. I guess they're not legacy games. They're more like campaigns. Like every game you play a case, but you can only play it once, right? So I guess it's like Sherlock, Consultant Detective in that way. So I'm excited about both of those games, and looking forward to, probably I'll end up buying both of them. I've already backed one of them on Kickstarter.
Small addendum. There is a game that's out there that I would like to see published one day, also named Detective, by Trey Chambers, that got put on the back burner of development hell from when I first met him 7 or 8 years ago.
It's a social deduction game, and I don't really like social deduction games anymore.
But it was good.
But I used to develop a lot of them.
Anyways. So,
Charles?
Detective, the first game. My second game was actually one that we discussed a bit, was Crusaders Thy Will Be Done, which is one of the big box games coming out from Tasty Mental Games this year. And it's basically, the theme of it is obviously you're dealing with things in the Crusade. It was another big Kickstarter. I believe it's like an area management game, but not really control as much as you're going through different hexes and using them. But I haven't, I'm not sure where it's evolved with the rule set, and it's been a while since I researched it, but it is something I've been hoping to see next year. So.
Is there like a mechanism to simulate the genocide of religious minorities in that?
Well, we will see. Right?
I think you're competing. You're actually competing against the other Christian nations, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, if I remember.
I see.
So it's more like who can be the best oppressor. But how many Euro games are about that, really?
So many. I mean, it's a great theme. Let's call it. The other thing I'm looking forward to in 2018 is the release of Sentinels of the Multiverse: Oblivion. So
is that legacy?
It's not a legacy game. Thank God. It is the last expansion in the Sentinels of the Multiverse universe, or multiverse, I guess. And it's a really cool expansion because instead of being one villain in one environment with the people who are fighting, you're fighting Oblivion, which is this huge guy, and he has 2 different villain zones with 2 different environments, and he can like completely destroy your characters, and you have to get new characters and fight him with that, and it's going to be some amazing fight, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Is it going to be accessible to new players, or is it really just the bow on the top ultimate love letter to existing players?
I haven't played it yet. I don't think it'll be that much harder than the base game. It's just sort of twice. You have 2 different zones, but other than that, I think it should be fun. Slash, I'm running it, so we care. It'll be fun.
All right. My second game is Seventh Continent, which is actually a 2017 release, so I won't really talk about it much, but let's face it, most people didn't get it in 2017, and a lot of people backed it for the second Kickstarter, so a lot more people will be playing it in 2018, so I'm really looking forward to that. If I ever finish Gloomhaven, that'll be my next, legacy tackle. And I did want to, I do occasionally self-promote here, and I will also mention Imperial, which is my game going on Kickstarter next month in February. From Level 99 Games. It's like it's a train game, but it's in a fantasy universe. It takes place in the Indians universe, like Argent did. And so, if you like train games, even if you don't, it's going to be a very, I think, unique game because you actually get like different spells that you can use. So it's like a train game with spells. It's like if Level 99 decided to make Steam. Yeah. So
is the Hogwarts Express or something that's
exactly. All right, so let's get to our worst 3 games of 2017, starting with dishonorable mentions. Charles, do you have any dishonorable mentions?
My dishonorable mention, I don't have any. You know why? Because Ben has 5.
That's great.
I actually only have a couple of dishonorable mentions. Ethnos, the game of drawing cards, and then not getting...
game.
Oh, no, wait, that's on my list. So go ahead.
Not getting the cards you want, and then putting those cards out for other people to get the cards they want. Terrible game. And Hunt for the Ring, the game of hidden movement, which for some reason people keep making games in this theme. It's like, oh, is he there? No. Is he there? No. Is he there? No. He got away. Good game. Why?
And he keeps playing them, even though he knows he hates them.
Only once.
All right, my dishonorable mentions, I have 2 for Colorblind Unfriendliness, Yamatai, and Century Spice Road. I don't think either of them are terrible games.
Actually, I think Century Spice Road is pretty boring.
Yeah, they are bland games.
Yamatai's good.
I enjoy the Spice Road more than Splendor, though. But both of them are fairly bland games. However, the Colorblind sins that they committed, automatic dishonorable mission. And then Fallout, which I'm sure we'll talk more about Fallout shortly because Ben super hated it, but I didn't super hate it. This was more of a disappointment to me, but we'll talk about it more in a second. Let's go to our number 3 worst favorite game, Charles.
Well, since it's already come up, I can move mine around. It's Ethnos, the area control card drafting game. So
2 against 1 then.
2 against 1. Trent really likes this game quite a bit. What's the best way to say it? I feel like you're just sitting there randomly drawing cards and trying to top deck behind whoever plays cards before you that happens to have a card that you need in order to get your area control. And honestly, I mean, I've played this game 3 times now. The first time I was excited, the second time I was nonplussed, the third time I was like, well, I guess it does play 6 players. So, and these are my general things. I don't really feel like I'm involved in actually crafting a strategy. Yes, I'm trying to go for certain areas, and obviously it does have some strategy in it, but can't really implement it unless the cards are down and someone else is taking the cards because they need it because it's orange or they need it because it's this particular race. Then I'm done.
It's like someone said, I'm going to take Ticket to Ride and remove choices from it. Because Ticket to Ride way too complicated. Obviously, you make it even worse.
Yeah, his name is Paolo Mori, though, is the designer. So
I will.
Angry letter.
I'll mount my defense when we get to best games because it definitely made my honorable mentions. Ben, what is your third favorite or least favorite?
Third least favorite game was Fallout, which Trey mentioned previously. This is actually funny because after I played the horrible board game, I started playing the video game because I was like, yeah, this is kind of a cool theme. And the video game is actually pretty fun. And I know I'm sort of behind the Trey on this one, playing Fallout 3. I'm like, what? 2 came out, I don't know how many years ago. But the board game is just a game that is not a game that is designed by the rules of how you should design a game. And by that I mean, there's stuff you can do in the game, but it's not the stuff that helps you win the game. So they want you to do all the stuff, like combat, but it doesn't actually help you win in any kind of way. Whereas they want you to go through some kind of random story, which doesn't have anything to do with it. And having played the video game, my opinion of the board game is even worse, because, like, they could have done so many different things to make it better that they they want to tell some story like that. I don't know, just Fallout, more like crap. Out.
I enjoyed our play, but I was not keen on playing it again just because that while there are some interesting mechanics, and I think for the most part they did a good job of integrating the theme. However, one of the big things in Fallout is special, which is like your stats. It's like charisma, intelligence, kind of D&D stats, and the way they implemented it in the board game is really not good. It's like very superficial. It's basically like if this card has the letter on it and you have the matching letter, you get a reroll, which is like pretty much the lamest way and least thematic way you could integrate that system. My other big problem with Fallout, and this is by far the biggest problem with the game, and that if you read reviews, almost everybody says this, they did not put enough effort into designing how you win the game. It's like totally random. You win the game by like drawing these random quests and fulfilling them. And if you happen to be set up to fulfill this random quest, then you're golden. If not, and if it's really hard for you to do, well, then you're bad. Also, some of them are tied to factions, so there's 2 factions in every scenario you play. And you could draw a quest that helps you with the faction that's already winning, and you'll get a bunch more points, or you could draw a quest for the faction that's losing, and it's worth hardly anything, and that's just a random draw off the top of a deck. I mean, you have hardly any control over winning this game. And so people will defend it as like, oh, it's not meant to be a strategy game, it's an experience game. I see that argument, however, we've come far enough in game design that we can have an experience game that also has some control over your destiny, that has some thought put into winning the game, and I feel like they really dropped the ball on like how you win that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to say it's an experience game. If the experience is not fun, then you fail at that as well.
I had fun with the experience, but the bad end game just left a terrible taste in my mouth. And
I had fun being next on the table next to them playing the experience, because there is something appealing about a good crash and burn, especially when the one person who bought the game is trying to get at least one full play so they can put it on their what is it? Oh yeah, Board Game Geek conquest list. But yeah, hey, licensed games have a hard road to hoe, and sometimes you just don't make it.
Yeah. Oh, my number 3 is Photosynthesis, which is not a terrible game in that the mechanics are solid, but is maybe the most boring game that I played the entire year. It is just like totally dull, and there's a lot of upkeep. I mean, I ranted about the upkeep on the last time I talked about it. It is just, I don't know why this game is popular. It's taken off. It's selling a lot of copies. It's getting a lot of mentions for like favorite game of the year, or at least in cracking people's top 10. I have no idea why. This game, I just found it super dull and boring, and everyone at the table felt the same way. We actually abandoned our play, cut it short. I was the only one that wanted to finish it, but I didn't care enough about finishing it that I objected to calling the game, so we just called it. And yeah, it is not a good game, in my opinion.
I ended up playing it 2.5 times, and it is a very good simulation of watching trees grow. I feel like you are watching trees grow. I will say it every time someone asks me about the game. If you want to watch trees grow, you can either go outside and watch them grow or play photosynthesis.
And they're about the same level of excitement.
And photosynthesis is my number 2 for worst game. Just sort of my impression of how you play the game. So I spend some sunlight to build a tree, and then it's your turn. And I spend some sunlight to build a tree. And then I spend some sunlight to build a tree.
Wait, I cast shade on your tree.
Okay, and I spend some sunlight to build a tree. And then I spend some sunlight to build a tree. And then I spend some sunlight to build a tree.
We're casting shade on this game. That's what's happening.
Anyways, moving on to other hated games. That's your number 2.
Yeah.
My number 2 is actually going to be Adrenaline, the first-person shooter game.
You're just hating on me today.
I'm not trying to, man. But
that's fair.
And you know what's funny is I have talked to some of the playtesters of the game, and it's it's not a bad game, but when you are taking a first-person shooter that is all about excitement, and you make a game that is not about instinct or excitement, I just feel like you've missed part of what you're trying to do with the game. Technically, it's good, but thematically, it's just off. First-person shooters don't actually play like this. They're much more, you do have some time to set up, but you're moving, you're fast, you're exciting, you're not stagnant planning things. So I just felt it missed this theme completely.
You know how like mob movies, there's nicknames that they give people that are erotic nicknames, like Smart Jimmy is actually really dumb. Adrenaline is one of those ironic nicknames, because that game is so slow and so boring. If you had any adrenaline from it, it would be like the adrenaline from wanting to kill yourself. Yeah, I mean, I don't think mechanically it's problematic, except for maybe the weapons are imbalanced between each other. But yeah, there's just so much downtime, and that game is just boring.
Yeah, my defense for both Ethnos and Adrenaline would be the same, is that these games should not be taken super seriously. Yes, they are strategy games, but like if people AP either of these games would be super miserable. Like there should be very little downtime. It should just be like draw a card in the instance of Ethnos, or in Adrenaline, make a move. You know, like don't sit there and puzzle it out for 5 minutes because it just kills the experience. They're not heavy strategy games. They're meant to be like exciting, fun, and any AP will kill that. So,
I mean, not very few games can actually survive tremendous AP, but there are plenty of games that are perfectly fine with a little AP. And you know, like I said, anyways, we'll just continue. We'll agree to disagree.
My number 2 is Majesty. I don't know the subtitle.
For the Realm.
For the Realm. Charles
number 2 mark on the subtitle.
The subtitle number 2 right there.
This is a game that does not deserve a subtitle. It is just a super light drafting game, and I ranted about it for 5 minutes on the BGG episode. So if you want to hear why I hate it so much, you can go back and listen to that. But suffice to say, I think the mechanics are solid, but the way the game is designed, there are some deep flaws that I experienced the first time I played it, and basically killed any hope of me ever enjoying the game and ever wanting to play it again.
Hey man, what card comes up in this line? Where am I sitting? Can I get that card? Is everyone else getting it? Hey.
Yeah. Okay, let's do number 1s. Charles, you want to start off?
I wanted to save my number 1 till the end because you all want to chime in, and it's different from yours. So I'm going to go ahead and let Ben do his number 1.
All right, my number 1, and also Trey's number 1, is Unfair. Unfair, the worst game I have played of all time, not just 2017. I might have ranted on the show before about this game, but just to reiterate my complaints about it. The problem with Unfair is the designers of the game are sadists, and they want the people playing it to suffer. So because of that, they make a game where you do things in the game, and then nothing you do matters because there's one deck of cards that is the most powerful thing in the game, and everything else is just a bunch of other pretend stuff. So, I'll just use my examples, which is, there's a card in the game that lets you steal half of someone's money at no cost. And money is $2 to 1. And you can collect huge amounts of money, like $90. So if I play this card, I stole 45 points from you.
No, when the person played it, I think they stole half of like $140 or something. Some crazy amount of money. So it was an insane amount of points that they stole with one take that card. It's just like, ugh. Yeah.
And I even play with the most unfair deck. There is a deck in there because they're like, it's like slightly modular.
We didn't play with the meanest deck?
No, the meanest deck is called the Ninja deck or something. And what that does is it destroys the entire ride. There are cards in that will, you build this ride and you put all these improvements on, and there's cards in there that just blow everything up. All that work you did, just, no.
I drew
Unfair.
The red card.
Worst game I've ever played.
Yeah, and then there are like protection cards in the deck, but you have to draw them. And then, of course, if you spend time protecting yourself, then, you could just be throwing the victory to someone else who doesn't have to protect themselves because they drew all the take-that cards and don't have any targeted to them. Like, it's just, that game is just, it's unfair. So it is correctly titled. And, I read the designer, and he, embraces that kind of randomness, and that's fine. Like, if you enjoy Unfair, you take-that games, go for it. But, don't try to tell me that game is like chess or something, because it's not. It's not a strategy game. It's an experience game. I take that experience game that I'm not interested in playing.
It's like, why'd they add the second part of the game if they're just gonna, make the take that? They should have made a simple take that game and got rid of the whole fair theme. Just be like, oh, I still have your stuff. You still have my stuff.
But no one's content with a simple take that game for whatever reason because
that's a terrible mechanism.
Are you kidding? Yeah. Munchkin sells like gangbusters.
That's also true.
Yeah.
So Charles, you're number 1.
So my number 1 is actually not a game. It's a designer. And that designer is Uwe Rosenberg.
What?
Yeah. I don't think 2017 was really good for him.
I think you're violating the rules of the list.
I know. I know.
Worst of your favorite games, a person.
It came up that, and he's a really, really good designer and stuff.
True.
But I just feel like he re-implemented too much this year. I'm like, you're on. I think because Feast for Odin really came up this year, which was
it 2016?
Or no, that's 2016.
Okay.
But it's like Cottage Garden was available, and then you have Indian Summer.
Garbage.
Then you have Caverna Cave versus Cave, which is
Decent.
part of his 2-player renovation strategy to keep on going. Then you got Dumpsford this year, which is, I don't want to say garbage,
Boring.
but it's just not, but it's like sort of re-implementing Glass Road, but I don't feel like anything is really, it's not that they are bad games, it's just disappointing, and I think this is the worst year for this designer. So
I do feel like maybe half of the games that released this year are not as great as they could be. And he did, his stuff is a little derivative. Like, instead of taking his Tetris mechanic and implementing it 4 different ways, like, why not just make one really awesome game from that mechanic? And he did. It's called Feast for Odin. Mm-hmm. And maybe if you want to split into a light game and a heavy game, fine. He can have one of each. And he did that too. It's called Patchwork. It's very good. But then he's like, well, it's still a cool mechanic. Let me make all these other games. And actually, they're not bad. Like, I played Indian Summer and I played Cottage Garden, and they're not bad, but I do feel like he could have put that design effort into making Feast for Odin a little better, or making an expansion for Feast for Odin, or same thing for Patchwork,
Or making a whole new game entirely that use different mechanisms.
That doesn't seem to be his thing, man. No more new games.
I think that's the biggest sadness I have about this year, is because of all the derivative stuff that's happened, they're not making new games anymore. Well, they are, but there's so much potential that could have been made, so many new ideas that could have been explored, but they're not, because they just keep spitting off the same games with slightly changes in them.
Yeah, I was doing a quick count on stuff on BGG. Do you realize that there were literally 19 re-implementations released uniquely of like just Agricola spin-offs and other things from Vive this year? Not just Agricola, but you have all these games that are just like, we're just tinkering with the third. Fields of Arley, something in addition to that. You release 4 things for that. It's just...
Yeah. Although I am super excited about the Fields of Arl expansion, because I love Fields of Arl.
I hope it's good. But anyways, let's go back to a happier spot.
Yeah.
Our happier spot with our best games
Alright.
of the year.
Start with honorable mentions.
Oh, my fault. I forgot. One last thing with the worst games, though.
Lay it on us, Charles.
2017 was the year that everyone discovered Seafall sucked. We didn't know this in 2016, but 2017, yes. But we already talked about that. But anyway, back to the best games.
All right. Honorable mentions. You want to go in reverse order this time? I'll start. Honorable mentions. Anachrony, solid worker placement game. If you like Tricarion, if you like a million things going on at once in your games, like, the only reason I'm not interested in buying it, because I feel like it would never hit the table, because it's like, this is one of those games you bring out every 6 months or so. So it's to me, I couldn't justify spending the money, but I did think it was a fascinating game. Cave versus Cave, as Charles already mentioned, a very solid 2-player game from Uwe Rosenberg, and Codenames Duet, also a solid 2-player game for 2 people. 2-player co-op game, but you can play it in teams, so it's not just 2 players.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good as long as Trey's not your partner, because he just gives the worst clues.
That is false.
And he's like, well, your clues don't make any sense. I'm like, those are perfectly fine.
Funnest part of that game, blaming your partner for screw-ups. Clans of Caledonia, which I think Charles will probably talk about in a minute. Ethnos, I thought it was a very solid, light strategy game that, if anybody bogs it down, yes, I agree, it will suck, but if people are playing fast, I think there's a lot of variety, a lot of replayability, because you have different decks that you play with every time, and they work very differently. Unlock, which we've only played one 20-minute scenario, but I loved it so much, and I can't wait to play more. And Gaia Project, which, the more I read about it, I've played it once, I played it in the playtesting stage, and I very much enjoyed it.
We played it twice.
I wasn't in that second game.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But I thought it was not as good as Terra Mystica. However, like, the more I think about it, I'm like, I think I would play the heck out of Gaia Project, because just exploring the different races, and I love the Terra Mystica system, so I think I am going to purchase it.
I actually ordered it.
Oh, I might not purchase it then. What Charles' copy? So those are my honorable mentions. Ben, do you have any?
I just have 2 honorable mentions. One is Downforce, which was a reprint.
Is that a good game? It looks kind of...
It actually is. So they combined a lot of different games. I don't remember all the name of them. One of them is Daytona 500. And it's just very simple. It's a 1-lap racing game, card play. The cards have multiple color cars on them. You bid for which car you're going to get, and then periodically you're betting on which car is going to make to the end. So the game is really simple, but it just works, and it plays like 6 players and maybe 20, 30 minutes, and it's just a good game. So that's one. The other one on my honorable mention list is Gloomhaven, which I won't say anything about because I'm sure that's on someone's list.
Yeah.
But I probably would have been higher on my list, but I didn't want my list to match up too much with the people around me, so I just put my honorable mentions for now.
My honorable mentions are 2 games that are best with 2 players. As you know, our opinions on 2 players here. If it's really good and it fits the time frame, then it's a great game to have. And the two-player games that I really like were Pyramid Poker, which is a 10-minute filler, 10, 15 max, even with AP. It's Jenga and poker. Easy game to teach, easy game to explain. If you're running a game group and you need some people to play a game that could last 10 minutes but could go up to 30 minutes because they'll replay it frequently, Pyramid Poker is your game.
Why can it only play 2 people?
Because you stack it on 2 sides, so...
Yeah. It's heads-up poker.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you stack it on 2 sides.
Otherwise you'll be able to see more things.
I was just envisioning Jenga and poker, and that sounds like a fascinating concept, but I don't understand why that would be limited to 2 players. But
but it's a pyramid, so it's basically 2-player. And Jenga's really, you can do it. Usually Pyramid Poker, when people are watching you play it, you will have people just sort of observing what you're doing and doing suggestions. It is very accessible in that manner. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that really good in games. I almost put it as my number 3. My other one is Santorini, another 2-player game that could be played at 4 and is horrible at 3. But Santorini is basically like a 3-dimensional chess, I would almost say. Maybe it's more like a 3-dimensional problem where you're just trying to get your person to the 3rd floor.
It's an abstract game.
Yeah, it's an abstract game, but it's very good. It could take as little as 10 minutes. It could take as much as maybe 20 or 25 minutes. It does have variable player powers, a lot of them, but you don't have to use them if you don't want to, but probably better if you do. And, it's also beautiful. It's like one of the most beautiful 3-dimensional games that was released last year, and, did gangbusters on Kickstarter. There's a lot of copies of it, so try one to play one if you can.
Excellent. All right, so let's do our top 3. So for me, there's a huge gap between my top 2 and my 3rd game and all my honorable mentions. My number 3 is Pandemic Legacy Season 2, which I would only rate an 8. I rated the original a 9.
9.5.
Or 9, yeah, it was...
9,
I thought Season 1 was an amazing experience, and I don't even really like that many co-op games, although funnily enough, all 3 of my top 3 are co-op games, so I'm like... I might not be able to have the street cred to say that I don't like co-op games anymore, since the top 3 games of this year were all co-ops.
Today has been this is the year of change, Trey.
Apparently.
It's the year of legacy.
Yeah, so I guess that's what, and they all are either campaign games or legacy games, so I think maybe that's, I'm so into like the legacy or campaign aspect right now, maybe that's what elevates these co-op games for me. But, yes, Pandemic Legacy Season 2, not as good as Season 1. It was a little too easy in some parts and impossibly hard in other parts, so I don't feel like it was as balanced as Season 1. And I also don't think the mechanics were quite as interesting, and the surprises weren't quite as drastic and interesting as Season 1. But
that's probably my biggest thing. The surprises, like, Season 1 was just surprise after surprise after surprise, and I never got that from this game.
Yeah, I mean...
even the big reveal... was art.
And I feel like, and it also aped a very famous piece of fiction, like to the point of almost plagiarism. But I won't say what it is because that would spoil it. But anyway, it just wasn't as good. But I still had a lot of fun playing it. It just wasn't as exciting as Season 1. Ben?
My number 3 is Emperor's Choice. I've talked about this previously on the podcast.
Good game.
It's a Japanese game, which hopefully will get an American publisher. I think what makes this game unique and what puts it in my top 3 for this year is the ability to choose scoring during the game. So there's like the different scoring cards that score for the different types of tiles that you draft. And the fact that you players get to choose which things score during the game, I think is sort of unique. And it's also, you can only choose them every so often until you have to reset them. So I think Emperor's Choice is something that, it's not so different from any game that's come out, but I think it's just overall very solid, and there's a lot of clever ideas in it. So that's my number 3.
2 things for my number 3 game. One last honorable mention, Insider. We both forgot that.
Oh, yeah.
Insider.
Well, it wasn't a 2017 game. It was 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Welcome to Centerville is my number 3 game, which is sort of a new game from Chad Jensen from GMT Games.
Oh, I haven't played that.
As you know, Chad Jensen is mostly a war gamer, but he occasionally will pop in a dominant species. And now his new game is Welcome to Centerville. It's a dice selection city building game. And you basically will roll dice and allocate them to different areas in order to build in the city. And there's a whole bunch of different side options that you have. And this basically works along the lines of you have your wealth and you have your prestige. And you're trying to raise those 2 tracks, and whatever number is lowest at the end is your score. A lot of things going on. Each of the die faces affects a different area. The die 4 of them are almost the same, but different colors, and the other 2 are sort of have unique things, and they are the in-game timer. On these other 2 die, you have timers that can advance the game forward, and you play it over 3 rounds, and you score at the end of all 3 rounds. It's very, very good, very tight, very strategic game. You will recognize some of the mechanics in it from other games, but they're all implemented very well. So I recommend trying to find it.
All right.
Sounds interesting.
All right. So my number 2 could probably be interchanged with my number 1. I love these games both so much. I rated them both 10s.
But you know the designer for number 1. So.
Yeah, that may have tipped it over the edge. But anyway, I think these are both amazing games, so definitely check them both out. And you probably already know what they both are, but we'll start with number 2, Gloomhaven. I don't really need to rave about it because you've probably heard so much about it already if you read or listen to anything about board games, because it's been basically the news story of 2017. And it's an amazing game. The one thing I'll add is that I don't really like dungeon crawlers at all. Like, I played Descent a few times. I played the D&D series, Castle Ravenloft, and those were decent games. I enjoyed them, but I didn't love them at all. Like, they were just like 6s or 7s to me. But Gloomhaven, I think the mechanics are so solid that it elevated that entire genre. It was so interesting. Like, just the decisions you make in that game, what card to play, what 2 cards to pair up, what actions to use from those cards, and just exploring the different characters and play styles and leveling up your character. You get lots of interesting decisions there too. So I think even if you don't like dungeon crawlers, check it out. It's just a great
D&D
game.
in the box. Original D&D in the box.
Yeah, it's actually more like Baldur's Gate in a box is how I describe it. Yeah.
So yeah, there was a time in my gaming development where I was looking for the perfect dungeon crawler, and I went through a lot of flops. Dungeon Run, good game. Descent, good game. But, it's just hard to have the same person keep playing that.
Or Descent 2.0.
Yeah, as it were. So I think Gloomhaven is a really good game. I don't know if it's perfect. I don't love the character I'm playing currently. But I think
it's not perfect, but
I think the thing that makes it the most interesting is the way that the characters level up over time. So you get to improve your deck and also your hit deck. And I think the way that works is something that differentiates it from all the other dungeon crawler games and actually makes it really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Probably playing some more of that later.
Hope so.
Number 2 for me is going to be Clans of Caledonia, let's see. Take 2 games, Green Deal and Terra Mystica, put them together and make a better game than both of them. Really, I've sort of said a lot about this game in the past. It's really good. I mean, I feel like it stole a lot of Gaia Project's initial thunder for me because I enjoyed what's the best way to say? Sort of like, I enjoyed putting the economy into Terra Mystica that Green Deal brought from it, and I think it made it more interesting, and it seemed fresher than Gaia Project did. I don't feel like Gaia Project really, implement, and it's changed a lot of stuff, but I don't feel like it was as big a change as Green Deal made. But maybe it's subjective. I'm gonna play Gaia Project a lot, and I'll be able to tell you more about this later. But Plans is a good game. It had a great Kickstarter. Very accessible designer on it, and everyone who plays it generally doesn't dislike it. So, and most people really do like it a lot. And it is, as far as playing that or base Terra Mystica, I'd probably just play that every time.
I think overall it's pretty solid. I'm not 100% convinced that the player powers are balanced between them, but I think it's pretty good overall.
It's close to Terra Mystica, man.
Oh, well, that's true.
It also has fewer factions, though, right? Than Terra
That's true.
8 versus, or 9 versus 14.
Yeah.
All the best games.
My number 2 was Lignum. So Lignum is a game themed around chopping logs, I guess.
Oh, I haven't played that game.
Yeah, it's really good. It's pretty heavy in some way. I don't own it. So the idea is like, let's see.
Sorry. Start over. Go ahead out.
I'm not editing that out.
Okay. So it sort of has the mechanism of you go down the track. So it's like the same mechanism as Glenmore or anything where you can jump ahead to get a more valuable resource, but then people behind you can get the things you leave behind. And it's just very simple. You go and you get the different types of workers. Some of the workers will go chop the wood. Some will turn it into planks. Some will help you ship it down the river. And overall, it's just a really heavy, crunchy, good game. Lignum, my number 2.
Excellent. All right, number 1. I'm not going to talk about
it.
Actually,
you do your number 1 then. We know what his is.
My number 1's also Spirit Island.
What can I do?
So, Charles is going to be the odd man out for both number 1s. Yeah, but we don't really need to talk more about it. If you listen to this podcast, and if you haven't, go back to pretty much any episode we've done in the past, and you'll hear us rave about Spirit Island for like 5 minutes.
Have we ever talked about Spirit Island before? I don't know, like maybe once or twice.
Yeah, you're right. We don't really mention it.
Times.
Yeah, no. Anyway, even if you don't like co-op games, check it out because it's like Gloomhaven. The decisions you make in Spirit Island are so interesting. You don't need to play against another player to make it interesting because the game system is so interesting in exploring the different spirits and abilities.
There's really nothing like it. I mean, it is unique in its class, and the only one complaint I have about it is I wish it were harder.
Oh Lord!
Really?
Yeah, because I don't know. I feel like we win too much, but
we have almost beaten it. We only have 2 more.
However, it's super good.
This was my funniest moment of the year. Was the fact that Ben played like 3 or 4 games with the designer of Spirit Island, not knowing he was the designer of Spirit Island. Because he doesn't pay attention to names. But we've known Eric for a long time. He would definitely be considered a friend of the show.
For sure. So if he didn't live in Boston, I'm sure he'd be on.
We could get him on, man. If we want to use technology, the technology is there.
That's true.
We have the technology. We can't rebuild it.
But predictability is good, so they can probably name my number 1 game of the year.
No, I kind of thought it would be Clans.
Oh, what's your number 1?
They don't know me. It's Terraforming Mars.
Oh,
what the hell?
That's Terraforming Venus.
That's
Terraforming Mars, Venus Next.
It's a 2016 release.
He's kind of expansion.
Venus Next.
Oh, okay.
And Hellas and Elysium. What can I say? This is the game that I keep on putting.
More, Charles.
I like Terraforming Mars.
It's just the best, man. It's super addictive. I can't say that the game that I played over 80 times in a year is not the best game of the year for me.
I guess that's fair for you.
So, there you go. I've recently gotten some new corporations. They did a BGG fan competition for it. So there's going to be 3 new corporations that you can just print out on BGG right now. If you didn't know, go there now.
Venus Next, would you say, now that you've played it a few times with that expansion, are you not afraid that it's diluted the deck too much? Because that seems to be the one complaint I hear about it.
Venus Next has diluted the deck a bit, but I don't think it's really that much because usually, at the level of Terraforming Mars that I've been playing, we can get through the entire deck before we were shuffling, and now we're still getting through the entire deck and shuffling. People underestimate as a strategic point being able to use or build the cards that increase your draw engine. It's something that will literally raise your score by another 10 or 12 points if you have some of those cards in your hand, and people just throw them away all the time because they don't want to make the initial investment, but it comes back and makes it better.
Not me. I love drawing cards in that game.
Yeah.
So I always love those cards.
But as far as Venus Next itself, I do, to add another part to the game that's not necessary, and the accelerant I think now is you have to play with it in order to get through the game at the same rate of speed. But
I thought you were initially against that.
I was initially against it, but now that I've played with it another 4 or 5 times, I'm like, yeah, this is probably ultimately necessary, and it adds another strategic layer where you're able to prevent people from getting things, small boosts that they were heading forward. And just look forward to hopefully this is the last of the terraforming Mars, and we'll just go straight to Venus or Jupiter, or whatever they want to go to next. So.
I just hope it's the last of the terraforming Mars conversation.
Nope, won't happen. All right.
To segue back to Spirit Island, though, the reason I like terraforming Mars is actually a very similar reason in Spirit Island. Like, in Spirit Island, you have a deck of power cards, and they're all very different. The reason I like terraforming Mars is there's a deck of cards in terraforming Mars that you draft, and they're amazingly different as well. So, like, in that way, they're similar games. I just love the variety and the replayability that both of them offer.
Yeah, but the distinct difference is in Spirit Island, if the cards are imbalanced, it's okay. It's a co-op, you know.
Yeah.
If I get something strong against the enemy, that's not a big deal. In Terraforming Mars, if the cards are imbalanced, that's one advantage a player has over another, and that just...
That's true, which is why I will only play Terraforming Mars with the draft. I think playing without draft is just crazy. All right, let's go to new games. Round it out with a few games we've played recently. I'll start with Hunt for the Ring. I also played it, and I didn't hate it. I'm not as anti-hidden movement game as he is, so I think it's interesting if you like hidden movement and you like Lord of the Rings. This merges the two very well, very thematically, and I thought it was a very interesting game.
Yeah, plus it had its nationwide release of BGG Con. So.
And it's very short. It's not like a 3-hour slog like some of them, so... It's more on the line of like Spectre Ops, but, you know, different theme.
Still crappy. The game I want to talk about first is called Pandemic Rising Tide, because, you know, more pandemic spin-offs is obviously something we need.
I'm curious in this. People have been giving this pretty good reviews.
Yeah, actually, it's a very interesting concept. So it's a combination between Matt Leacock, Mr. Pandemic, as I think he's known, and also the guy who does Splatter games. So it's actually a clever idea. It's sort of a similar idea to Pandemic with the cards coming out and... the cubes on the board, but instead of having different diseases, it's all one type of thing that comes on the board. It's water.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because the game starts with a lot of different dikes on the board that whenever water would infect the place with dikes, it instead destroys the dikes. Mm-hmm. And then there's also water on the outside of the board, and if the outside of the board is not blocked by dikes, it will start flowing in. There's a mechanism in the game where the water will flow from the outside or from wherever there is water and spread out. So it's like constantly reinfecting. And then sort of the counterpoint to that is you can build buildings that will constantly get rid of cubes.
Okay.
So it's actually really interesting. And the cool part about the game is instead the way you cure diseases in the game is you build these buildings in certain spots and they give you some bonus. But that's actually variable. You can have different wind conditions that you can play with each game. So it's kind of a cool idea. So it's actually kind of a strange game because at the beginning of the game we were playing and we were doing really well, but then the game accelerates really quickly because once you get to the higher infection rates, which I'm still using the pandemic language, although it's not what they have, the ocean starts getting more cubes, so then once you have a bunch of cubes in the ocean, it starts flowing inward and then your whole place gets crazy.
So do you think, would this be a justifiable addition to someone who has and enjoys Pandemic? Like I understand, like I'm looking at this from the viewpoint that I am burnt out from playing season 2. Yeah. But in another 6 months, would this be a Pandemic game I should try out to play?
I think it's worthwhile. At least trying it. I might even recommend getting it after my play of it. You know, I'd say it's quite good. It's very different.
Charles, do you have any recent plays?
I did. One of my recent plays was Beyond Baker Street, which was actually released in 2016. I didn't even know that, but I guess it was interestingly difficult to find, or maybe I just got overlooked. But anyways, Beyond Baker Street is a game that uses Hanabi as its core mechanic. And basically you're trying to solve 3 cases that are all sort of color coordinated with a fixed Hanabi deck of 4 colors that is numbered from 1 through 6. 24 card deck. To say it's based on the Hanabi mechanic, what they've added to it is instead of clues, you have a timer track for Sherlock Holmes to beat you to solving the case. So you're basically racing against Sherlock Holmes, and that's set by the difficulty level, which is the various investigations, which will all come with a certain number on them. So the easiest one is you have 15 spots. And then it gets up to the point where you only have 8 spots, quote unquote, clues for Holmes to have before you move from there. You have to sort of use a lot of different things. In addition to the 3 cases that you're solving, there is something called the impossible, and that always has to be at 20. So you need to add cards from the game of your numbered cards to the impossible, and depending upon the difficulty level, if you add a card above the limit, homes would advance. Anyways, mechanics are sort of hard to go, but it basically re-implements Hobnobby in a unique way, and it's actually a little bit deeper than Hobnobby, and it also introduces variable player powers that can also increase or decrease the difficulty of the game.
Excellent. How did you feel about it?
I thought it was excellent. I would recommend it to people. I mean, anyone can play, but I would recommend it to people who play Hobnobby. It's definitely.
Did you bring it?
No. Jason has it.
All right. I wanted to talk about Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, which is, it's not a board game technically, and it's not on BGG, but I would consider it a board game. I mean, if you're going to consider any of these other games that require app integration, like XCOM and stuff like that, I think it should be considered a board game. Basically, you have a manual, and there's a bomb, and one person's using the app, or they're on the website. You can also play it on a laptop, and they're telling the group, like, you know, how to disarm the bomb, and everybody else has a paper manual, and they're like flipping through it and figuring out what they need to do. It's a co-op game. It's a real-time game, and it's pretty interesting. It's very high intensity, so, you know, if you like that kind of experience, definitely check it out.
What is with you and co-ops, man?
I mean,
you love co-ops.
Chambers.
Co-op fanatic.
I didn't say I loved it. It's an alright game.
Whatever, man. You keep playing everyone you get your hands on it.
Hi, my name's Trey. I really hate co-op except for these 7, 10, 50 co-ops I like. Alright, the game I want to talk about next is called Lost Legacy, the Starship, which is a game that is in the same class as Love Leather, but worse. Someone took Love Leather, same idea. You have one card hand, you draw a card, you play a card, but made worse. First gripe I have about the game, the player aid, extremely stupid. It doesn't list the cards as a good player aid would, but it does tell you how to set up, and how to draw one card, and how to play one card. Obviously very important rules. You'd have to have a player aid for that.
Probably you're afraid of getting sued by AEG.
Sure, that's it. So the other problem is there's a lot of the cards in the game that do nothing. Like, you play the card and you literally do nothing. A lot of the cards are things that they react when someone looks at your hand. So when you play them, they don't do anything. Some cards let you take a card from the deck and put it in the middle. Some cards let you look at a card in the middle and switch your card. It's just like, most of the game is not doing anything, and it's just random and boring, and I'm not a big Love Letter fan, but someone managed to make it worse. So I have to recommend against Lost Legacy, the Starship.
Charles?
Oh, yeah. Oh, back to me? Okay. I finally got to play Azul.
Oh, how'd you like it?
I did like it. I have to say, I like Michael Heaslam games now. He's designed Vikings, he designed the Tikal game, and it's sort of a tile-laying game. This was like the darling of BGG-Con. I never got a chance to play it there because it was almost always full, or someone would just decide they randomly wanted to play again with the same group. Irritating. But yeah, it's basically you're doing a communal draft of tiles and from these factories, and you pick all the same color from a tile, and then it goes into the center, and then you can draft tiles in the center, and you're just trying to sort of fill your board in an abstract manner, and you score points for lining up things on the grid. It sounds rather boring when I just speak out the rules like that, but it's actually pretty fun, very interesting. A lot of sort of reading people and making decisions. So the player interaction is very good. The puzzle elements are good, and it has two sides. You can either play a side where the positions of the tiles are set, or you can have one where it's sort of freeform and you choose where the blocks go.
It is a very boring concept. However, the game has two things that kind of elevate it. One, it's aesthetically beautiful, like these little tiles. They're just shiny and
they're
pretty.
Like mahjong quality.
Yeah. So they did a great job with that, because I think if it was just like tiles, like cardboard chits, the game would not be at the level it is. So the aesthetics went a long way there. And mechanically, it's very simple, which could make it boring. However, there's a lot of tension built into the game, because you're like, oh, I hope that person doesn't take the tiles I want.
Yeah.
I hope they don't take the tiles I want. And then inevitably they take the tiles you want, and you have to come up with a backup plan. So, that tension, I think, makes the game fun. So definitely a solid game.
Very solid.
I want to talk about Pulsar 2049. I know Charles has talked about it in the past. That was like their game, or his and I think other people's favorite game from BGG-Con. I thought it was a solid game mechanically. However, it is point salad, and as a rule, I hate all point salad games. So I do think the game has solid mechanics, and if you don't mind point salad, I think you'll enjoy it. But for me, so in other words, if you're a Stefan Feld fan, meaning his modern releases in the past 5 years, not the ones that were actually good, like Notre Dame. But if you like his newer games, then I think you'll like Pulsar, because it's definitely, if Stefan Feld made a dice drafting movement game, it would be this game.
I don't know, I think it's closer to mid-level Feld level game. I don't like his newer stuff. And Merlin, train wreck, sort of. But
did you play Merlin?
Listen to the rules explanation in the past. I do want to play it, though.
Yeah, it sounded good to me when I heard the rules explanation, but I haven't played it. I want to talk about a game called Dogs of War, which I just played. It's a Cool Mini or Not game, so therefore it's extremely overproduced. There's variable player...
Available. We call that available.
Is that what we call that? Okay. There's variable player powers, and so like each figure has different each player has different generals, and some of the generals have really ridiculous things. So like my favorite one was, I don't remember the name of the character. She looked like Marie Antoinette, and she had an enormous hat, this character. So like the hat was just like a giant, I don't know what you call this shape, cylinder, I guess? And that was as big as the other part of the figure.
Oh, you're actually talking about a hat. I thought you were using a euphemism.
No, she really had a huge hat.
Okay.
I mean, she also had a big euphemism, but she had a big hat.
Okay.
And so the game essentially is sort of a war game kind of in some way. So each round there's 4 different battles, and there's factions fighting each other. And they're sort of randomly, and then there's rewards for going in those battles. And what you'll do each round is you'll assign one of your generals with some sort of soldier, get the bonus you play on, and then add that much strength to that side. And then if that side wins, then that faction goes up in value, and you get certain shields that give you points for being part of that faction. So it's a very simple game. I mean, it took maybe 10 minutes to explain. There are cards that are in the game that aren't perfectly balanced, but I think overall it was pretty fun, and I definitely recommend Dogs of War.
Charles, do you have any others?
I have one more game. It's not really new, but it's good. Thunder Alley. It's a NASCAR racing game. Everything in a circle or a big oval. However, I will say that this is a game that you don't think you'll like, but it is very enjoyable to play. It's very hard to find a good strategic racing game.
Of course.
And this game has it. GMT always does an excellent job with their releases. This is my small GMT love letter episode, and I just think everyone should try to play this game once. You basically get 3 stock cars that you're managing on a track, and you can use them to help each other win and draft off of other cars, and you pull a whole line with you. All the mechanics are very good, and they fit the theme of the game perfectly. And it has a number of different tracks. The reason I brought up as a new one is because I played a new oval track, and they all have different sort of passing things that you can do and curves, so give it a shot.
All right. I'm going to talk about 3 more games real quick in lightning round fashion. Spot It, which is like an older game. It's basically a real-time kind of party-style game where you're like trying to look for things on a card, and the first person to get it gets to get rid of a card and trying to get rid of your cards. It's a good game. It's it's a classic for a reason. Adventure Time Love Letter. It's just Love Letter with Adventure Time theme. If you like Love Letter, you like Adventure Time, get it.
What's the difference? What's the new thing?
They didn't. I don't think they changed the rules in this one at all. They might have.
Love Letter,
but who knows? And then Mana Surge, which I literally played this game 2 weeks ago, and I don't remember anything about it. I remember there's like different suits. Was it a trick-taking game? I honestly this is such a forgettable game.
It's
I don't remember
like a trick-taking game,
anything about this game. It's just like...
Oh, I remember things about this game.
It was just wiped from my mind, so I guess it was totally forgettable. So
it
I guess
was bad.
Did Ben complain about it?
So here's the problem with Mana Surge.
Oh, okay, I guess he is.
There's a mechanism...
Okay.
It's like worse Uno, okay? So I don't want to go into the mechanisms because really, who cares? But here's the problem. There's the biggest problem with the game. There's like a reverse in the game if you play the same number. And what the purpose of that is if someone's winning, you stop them from playing. You just keep going around, and whenever it would go back to them, you reverse. So the way they have the catch-up mechanism in this game is by stopping you from actually playing. That is just bad game design.
Oh, well, let's not even mention that. Do you have any more games that you want to talk about, Ben?
Sure, I'll just go through a couple real quick.
Oh my god, I rated it a 1. I've only rated like 5 games a 1 in my entire life, so apparently I hated this game, and maybe that's why I didn't remember playing it. I must have just blanked it
It's
from
just
my memory.
trauma, I'm sure.
Trauma, man. It's just selective memory. It's like this moment in my life I cannot ever relive again.
Okay,
yeah,
so we do not endorse Mana Surge.
Yeah, Mana Surge is just bad. Alright, so I'm just going to talk about 3 quick card games. One is Dia de los Muertos. It's been rethemed as 4 Dragons if you want to look it up, because it's apparently really hard to find it. It's sort of a trick-taking game that plays 4 players, and it's kind of interesting because whenever you score points, whenever you get a trick that gets points in it, one of your opponents gets to steal a random card from your hand and then give one back to you. So kind of like if you have a good hand, then you sort of lose cards from it, which is interesting. And then there's sort of a lot of wonky mechanisms in it. The way you score is you have to get certain pairs of scoring cards to make sets. So that's one I recommend. Another one is called Trick of the Rails, which is I believe it plays 3 to 6, but it was really good with 3 players. It's a trick-taking game that's combined with a train game. So whenever you win a trick, you'll either get stock in one of the trains, or you'll get to place track to increase the value of things. And it's actually a very clever idea, which I'm surprised hasn't been more used to sort of combine those 2 mechanisms. And the last one I want to talk about is called Smile.
Thanks.
Which is like No Thanks. It's actually sort of a simplified version of No Thanks. It's the cards are like from -5 to +6, and there's like suits of the cards, and whenever you get the same suit, you lose both the cards. So like if you get 2 yellow cards, so I could collect the -3, and if I get another card in that same suit, I can flip it over and not have to do that penalty. It's the same idea of like you add a token to a stack, and then once you choose not to, you take that stack and all the tokens on it. It worked really well. It was actually surprisingly vicious for as cute as the theme was.
Okay.
All right. Well, I guess that does it for our 2017 retrospective. Thank you so much for joining us and listening. Please don't forget to like share, and
subscribe.
Yeah, things that you hear all the time.
On the Twitter, on the Instagram.
Yeah, we are on all the social medias. YouTube, Twitter. I even have an Instagram account that I post board game stuff on. The link is on my Twitter if you were interested in that. And my Twitter account is @eternallybored, no underscore, and board is spelled like board game, of course. The website is eternallybored.com, and that's it. Until next time.
We're eternally bored, so you don't have to be. Unison!
Yes, we did it. Now, I don't understand. I hope you don't have to hear my dog barking in the background for this episode, because really, I have 2 people, our producer and his fiance, out there.
Blame the dogs barking on the people. That's perfect.
Yes, man, I do. You know why? Because I'm like, my dog doesn't bark when he's outside with me. Yeah. He's barking because Ian is making him bark.
He's surprisingly quieter when he's inside and we're recording the podcast.
Exactly. So I don't understand what they're doing. I know Ian is out there probably just rolling on them in fur and stuff. So
join us next time for our episode, Playing Games with Dogs.
Look. Yes, we this is probably going to be a bad episode on that. Well, not a bad episode. It'd be interesting. We can talk about
maybe our producer's good enough to filter out the background noise.
It's certainly possible.
We'll find out.
He could be.
Let's turn off this camera.
Are you sure? Because this is going to be a good outtake. I mean, outtakes after this. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not going to edit this out.
You're not going to edit? You got to edit this. Wait, no.
I'm going to edit it out of the podcast. I'm not going to edit it out of the YouTube video.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's what you get. If you view us on YouTube, you get this bonus tuxedo discussion. That's the name of his dog.
Hey, Tuxedo got a discussion point. I can show you pictures of him. Oh, the last thing I forgot. The best game of 2017 was the Houston Astros in baseball because they won the championship. I thought the bring it in earlier, but of course, we were talking about board games, so the sports love didn't happen. But for people who are in Houston, it is nice to have a championship team. So that's our little side.
First championship in Houston in like 3 decades almost. Yeah.
Yeah, it has been 3 decades, man. We are old. No, 2 decades. The Rockets in 95.
Oh, okay.
So almost 22
years.
Welcome to Eternally Bored, the sports podcast.
Hey, man. There are board gamers who like sports. I mean, you see Bottom of the Ninth. We could do a whole episode on it if you would.
No. You can not invite me to that one. I'm happy to. You take Jeffrey on that one. I'm sure you could talk about sports.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you all very much for jumping in and listening to.
If you stayed on this long, you get the secret prize code A5711.
It's not always
It's not in your
7-Eleven.
decoder ring,
There are
kids.
no free hot dogs at the end of this. Bye.